want to share just a quick snapshot of kind of where we have been in the past. Obviously, with the ABM team, we have been pretty embedded with relationships with our sales team, ABM and field marketing. Those two teams both report up under me, and at many times we're kind of doing things together, and at many times we're coming apart. I know that that looks a lot different from organization to organization, but historically, the ABM and field marketing teams have really worked bottom of funnel, focusing on that, pipeline acceleration, active deals. How can we understand what makes these companies tick and frankly understand who these personas are that are involved in this decision, and how do we kind of use that information to develop personalized campaigns or events to support upsell, cross-sell, and closing of existing pipeline. And I think given all of the research that you shared earlier, Scott, there's a realization that we need to take some of these ABM mindsets and apply them to our broader demand gen campaigns. And that's not to say let's just ABM-matize everything, because there's still a point in kind of the customer journey where ABM can come in to help supplement or be integrated with these larger campaigns. But we need to talk about buying groups when we're just talking about mass demand gen campaigns. We need to understand like there are maybe more personas involved in these discussions than our core end user. The data said 18 people across North American teams, and close to 1,000 interactions. Like we cannot assume that it is one persona that is going to be doing all of those things and making all the decisions and engaging with all of our content. So we really have to adapt our strategy from a messaging perspective, from a channel perspective, from a targeting perspective, to figure out how to kind of get that whole group engaged, or at a minimum educated, which I think is the piece that I want to stress. Like, a lot of our job as people go into hermit mode and not fill out forms and not engage with brands directly, is how do we just continue to educate in a way that is not invasive? Because I'm just as guilty as our prospects. I don't want to fill out forms. I don't want to do these things. So how do I get my education? So I think that's the challenge. Our team is kind of looking at how do we move more up funnel, upstream, while still providing kind of like that unique ABM experience.
That is just one of the big headlines you said, is buying groups is not just for ABM. Buying groups is a standard practice, no matter if you have an ABM one-to-one, one-to-many, or you just have a strong demand engine that's out there. That's fascinating. And also, you're a little bit against the grain. Most marketing teams struggle to go down funnel. That's where you've been living, Adam, and probably why you've been put in the role of global demand activation, to make sure you can do the full journey and make sure you're covering that top of funnel effort. That's really interesting. Keep taking us through your strategy and how you're thinking.
Yeah, totally. And I realize this is a bit of an eyesore, but I think, the commentary, and I also kind of laughed at myself having a bit of a funnel on here based on your previous slide. So let me explain to you where you're at in my funnel, please. No, I think the commentary here is like, how are we envisioning making this change? Historically, like I said, my team would be really focused on kind of like that dark green, middle color green, like really understanding the bottom of the funnel and how that converts into pipeline. But what we need to think about is, how do we group accounts into like clusters earlier in the funnel, but also allow them to do a bit of a self kind of guided journey through your marketing. We at Thomson Reuters, we sell multiple products to multiple kind of personas. And what we're always kind of talking is segmenting, targeting, like how are we making sure that a customer is not receiving conflicting messages when they may have a similar persona across multiple products that we're trying to sell. And so we're really kind of trying to solve that here with this very simplified diagram. But basically the spark notes is, we have what we're calling umbrella campaigns across the top. They're not that they are meant to share both that education on the brand aspect that you were hitting on earlier, Scott. How do we make sure that all of these people that we want to engage in the buying committee are getting a general message that's relevant to our brand. So when they hear Thomson Reuters, they know tax software or legal software or compliance software, depending on the area that we're focused. We then know that within those three groups that I just mentioned, we do have a solution message that is more specific to the pain points of those individuals, but we need a way, and Matt, you kind of hit on it earlier, like on your back end, if you're not collecting the right data at the different
Yeah.
times, and this is honestly our biggest challenge that we've been working through for the last couple of months, and we're excited to launch it in Q1. But what's the segmentation and what's the prioritization amongst potentially competing campaigns or at least competing interest on behalf of the customer. So, we are working on that logic actively and trying to understand at what point do we have enough data collected on the account or the individual. And I think that's where it gets a little messy sometimes
Yeah.
is account level data might be saying one thing, individual level contact data might be saying something else. How do we marry those together to get the euphoria of right person, right message, right time? Um, this is kind of our take on how we're going to do that. But between each of these blocks on the screen, there's some fairly sophisticated logic that depending on what data sources you have, it really needs to take into account. So we're highly engaged with our analytics team and our CDP team to understand like how do we build these segments out in a way that we can for sure say this is a priority message that we can send to this individual based on the signals that we've seen.
Man, have we come a long way from lead scoring. I mean it. I'm not being funny. I mean, that's part of this discussion today, right? You have to set the systems up. You have to think. The old school would have been, we're going to do a brand awareness campaign, your general campaigns. That's not what you're saying. You're building brand awareness and moving towards preference to build data to understand. And then you can verticalize and prioritize the segments and solutions that's going to add to that. Gosh, do we have to have some patience? And that is super hard to do.
There's a huge change element that comes along with that too, Scott. Like in terms of this double funnel idea and what, senior execs are accustomed to seeing and making sure like how do you change that mindset for your senior execs because they're always going to pull you back into what you probably don't want to measure anymore. Those speeds and feeds of MQLs and the real more people-based metrics. And so to kind of collectively talk this into existence, this idea of a double funnel and hey, it's not always about how many MQLs you generated and whatnot. That takes a ton of time, effort, and socialization. It's
I'm
a
exhausted thinking about it, Matt.
exactly, yeah, it's an exhausting
Well,
conversation.
It
So
is.
and honestly, where we're at is we need to do those at the same time. Like we are not, I'll admit, we still have an MQL target. Like that is still part of our funnel is understanding that and there's not a lot of I gotta be careful, I guess, what I say, but like the way to track engagement still happens at an individual level. So we need to be able to say person A is doing these steps and they are showing higher intent or they've shown us some additional signals that we can then gather into the account. Um, and we could probably talk about this for a while, so I'm gonna move on.
But your point is you're in the middle of that shift. The speeds and feeds
And
of
it's
MQLs,
complicated.
yeah, and speeds and feeds
It's
of
complicated.
MQLs, to use Matt's words, aren't as important as gathering the individual data to understand, to build better segments, to build better buying groups, to get to that prioritized and verticalized engagement. It all
And
does make sense. It's a building block thing.
at the end of the day, we are chasing a single opportunity, no matter how many MQLs or individuals we create. One account can only buy one piece of software at a time,
Yeah.
which I think is one of the challenges when we talk about scaling this. So, to just think about how we're doing this and how we're framing this up and things that we've been doing previously it is talking, and again, hitting that light up the dark funnel statement from earlier is we need to understand that we have the right people in our database that cover that buying group. It's understanding who those personas are. So for us, that means IT is more of a an important role in our campaigns. We need to understand what those job titles are. Everybody who's ever created bleed scoring or a target list in the past knows that what we think are the perfect job titles for who we want to target and how we want to score them are not actually what come through our systems and who show up to our events and who engage with our campaigns. So there's kind of a shifting mindset to really understand who are these buying groups, and do we have those people either in our database, or to kind of my next couple points here is what additional channels can we build into our plays to make sure that we are hitting those buying groups and make sure that our targeting aligns across those channels. So we're looking, because of these people who are staying off your website, not converting on your website, not having the right data to say they are A, B, C, or D, or they're maybe not even part of our database already. We're looking to third party, things like social media, where we can target broadly and get more engagement within the new personas that we're building out to help enrich our database, to build out that buying group and get a good view. Okay, now we know that we have the 10 personas in the tax department or the legal department. We have 3 personas in the IT department. We have a compliance persona that's showing engagement. So if we don't have those, one, if we don't understand who those are, which are different for every company, there's probably a core that are the same. IT compliance are becoming more and more important. More we talk about AI, all the points made earlier, the complexity of these systems and the integration between the systems, compliance and IT become more and more important. And how do we build out our database to support getting them the right message?
That's why third-party demand, and that's where you can more strategically use some old school techniques like content syndication in a modern way to do that. And you're not even thinking about old school. You're thinking about ways to utilize those channels, which are great.
I think it's funny because I think content syndication became a really dirty word because people were just taking the leads and trying to pass them to calling team and essentially spamming people. But there is a real time and a place for every single tactic, including content syndication, and this might be one of them.
Yeah, no, I love the way you're thinking about it. Reimagine is the theme of our conversation. All right,
Yeah.
Mr. C-suite, what's happening here?
So I think you showed it earlier. There is a bit of a democratization, but there is also a need to understand how the C-suite engages and how they contribute to the velocity of our deals. And so we're taking a bit of a new approach this year, at least in how we've marketed them historically, and almost pulling them out and treating them separate. They will kind of live in that more top of funnel message, because what we want to be able to facilitate in ours, and we're kind of uh, moving our teams around a little bit internally to really hit this home, is how do we get what's that like top of funnel brand message that we were talking about earlier, but specific to the C-suite, and we're using a lot of different events in order to kind of get this message across. And it's not salesy at all. It's educational. It is purely to get our executives to connect with other executives and share both some of that empathy that we're talking about, but also potentially, influence existing business conversations. And so by putting an additional focus in there, in the lens of understanding the buying groups, then gives us a new way to feed signals into our team on we've had this level of C-suite engagement. That now means let's kind of activate some of those channels that we were discussing earlier. Maybe based on event attendance, we follow up the following week with a content syndication program that allows us to acquire contacts at an account that we didn't necessarily know was maybe going through an ERP integration in 2025. So, and I think the thing that we have really been focused on over the last 3 months and still have room to work on is how do we package that handoff and what is the relationship between marketing sales throughout some of these higher level C-suite engagements. Sales needs to be really brought in early. If you don't bring them in early enough, there's going to be kind of a lot of questions on what and why. And, why are you trying to facilitate this conversation? So, even in the world of ABM and marketing and sales alignment, there's always more alignment to be built.